All right, so this is the first card that we're going to create. And before we start actually creating the card, we're going to prep the die cuts, and I'm going to show you how I am doing that. So the very first step, we have a couple die cuts here that have double-sided tape over them. So I have a roll of double-sided tape here. This is my favorite double-sided tape to use. It works really, really well. I get it in the roll because I love it and I use it so much. For starting out, you can get packages with sheets. This is a great way to start out, just to see if it's your cup of tea. If you find you love it, this way ends up being more economical. It is a little bit more expensive it is a lot more expensive to buy a whole roll than just some sheets. But again, if it's a technique that you love doing and you know that you're going to do it a lot, you might as well get the more inexpensive way in the long run. So I put my tape with the sticky side up, I put my cardstock on top of it, and I'm just going to trim the edges here. And then my cardstock is actually a little bit wider than the tape, so I'm going to trim that just so that I don't accidentally die cut a piece that has some tape on and just some plain cardstock. So I like to trim it right along the edges to make sure that I don't have any areas that don't have tape on there. If I had a piece of cardstock that was narrower than the tape, I'd trim the tape off, and I like to put that tape on the side of my roll, and I'll typically use that up putting cards together and whatnot so it doesn't go to waste. Like I said, it's not cheap to get it by the roll, so you might as well use it all up. From here, I'll just take my dies, whatever dies I'm wanting to use, this is the actual one, and I will put it against the printed side and run it through my die cut machine. I put it back and forth a few times, just because we're going through the tape backing, we're going through the tape, and we're also going through the cardstock. So by putting it back and forth, you make sure that it has a better chance of cutting. When you bring it out, you can pretty much see if it's cut all the way through, and if it hasn't, just turn it a different way and put it through your die cutting machine again. Maybe a piece of cardstock underneath your cutting plate just to tighten that sandwich up a little bit. But I've got those already die cut here, so I'm going to die cut my pieces for the candle. I'm going to grab my machine. And doing these cards are a great way to use up a bunch of scraps. What I'll typically do is I just lost my train of thought there. I'll typically just grab a whole bunch of scraps and then just sit in front of the TV and die cut a bunch of things. I don't do the die cuts for the specific card and then put the card together. It seems to be a lot that way. By taking just some times and prepping the die cuts ahead of time, when it comes time to actually putting the card together, it comes together really, really easy. And it's much easier to just spend some time prepping the exact same die cut so that it is ready for you when you're ready for that particular card, putting it together. So I'm not doing the thin candle from this die here. I'm only doing the thicker candle, so I'm just going to put those pieces aside. The pieces that came out of my for the smaller candle, I usually put them together, but then I'll set them in a little Ziploc bag so that they are ready to go when I want to create that. And then I have a couple little candle flames here. I'm going to put my cardstock there. So my tray is pretty picked over because I've been creating the cards for this class, but this is how I typically will do it. I'll sit with some scraps and I'll just have a tray and I'll just kind of pile them up in here. And then whatever I don't use for those particular cards, I'll just put them in Ziploc bags and store them. And I have a container that just has a bunch of different die cut pieces and stuff like that. That way I can customize them to whatever project I'm wanting to work on then. If you prep them ahead of time and put glitter on them or whatever it is that you're doing with them, you're kind of limited to whatever colors you use for that. So I just like to have them prepped so I can choose what glitter colors I'm using when I choose to make them. All right, so for this candle here, I'm just going to glue the top, and it's pretty easy to see exactly where the pieces go. Oh, there's my glue. I moved it yesterday. So I have a pair of tweezers here. They're reverse tweezers, so you squeeze them to open them, and when you release your hands on them, they close shut. And for these particular cards, I find them very, very handy, both for putting little small pieces on, as well as for placing and attaching die cuts like I'm doing for this here. Now this particular die cuts out the outside of the flame, and then this one here cuts up the back of the flame. So the back of the flame has that center part, and then my light piece that has a piece cut out of there, that goes on top of it. Put my glue on there. Some of these pieces are easy enough to just grab with your fingers, but sometimes some of those smaller pieces are just, it's just easier to take your tweezers. Like this one here, I want to put some glue just around the outside parts, so it's just easier to have the tweezers holding them so you don't get glue all over. There we go. And when I'm creating die cuts with some texture, I like to use glossy accents on top of them. And obviously glossy accents need some time to dry. So you're not going to put them on there and then you're not going to start the card. You want to make sure that they have time to sit and dry. So for this particular die cut, I'm going to put some glossy accents on the flame. All right, this bottle is almost done, so it is getting pretty empty. If you happen to have a bottle that clogs, I have a thumbtack here that I use for this. I'm usually sticking it in the top there, freeze it up. So I put the glossy accents on the flame, and I'm also putting it on the little drippy part of the candle so that it has some different texture from the rest of the candle. So that can get set aside to dry. I already have one dry and ready to go for when we're creating our card. Next step here, I'm going to take these greens here that are die cut, and you can see they're all different shades. I'll typically pick out a bunch of different shades of the same color so that they all go together, but they don't necessarily need to be the exact same green for the whole thing. So I'm going to take a dark green ink, and I'm going to go from the stem brushing out. Doesn't matter whether you get ink on the stem, because that is going to be hidden and tucked underneath other things. But this way we get a little bit of shade or shadow in there, a little bit of different color, and it's the easiest way to just get a little bit of dimension. And once again, super easy to do if you have just a bunch of them and do them all at the same time and then set them aside. So those guys are done.